pricking or anything like that. Let's pause and settle into a comfortable seated position, standing position if you prefer. Simply take 5 minutes to let our bodies soften, quieting the mind. Allowing the breath to feel peaceful and easy. With every exhalation, allowing your whole body to soften and to deepen into this comfortable spaciousness. As you inhale, things become clear and still. When your mind wanders away, simply soften around the distractions so that your mind settles back into the present moment. If there's any emotional accumulation, you can simply allow that to come to rest. Feeling comfortable and peaceful. Remember that this is, in a way, one of the most important practices within this set, this coming to rest and stillness. And if you are ever practicing this and you feel especially good about it, that it feels very nourishing and that you're able to go deeply more easily than usual, then just keep on with the practice. Forget what we're doing, ignore us, close the screen or whatever, and allow this practice to fall deeply inward, because sometimes that's the rhythm and the movement of the day. And likewise, on those days when it feels especially difficult, you're scattered and wild inside, then of course, maybe it's best to close the screen, step away, go for a walk. Walking is usually the best practice when you're feeling very emotional, even if you're just pacing around in your living room and not trying to push energy out. You're working on being free and easy as you walk. Your steps simply move where they do until that helps even out your qi a little bit, the flow in your body, and then come back. Do more sitting until you become slightly more still if you can, slightly softer, more present. And then once that process is done, that settling and nourishing, that's when we move into the rest of the set. You take that with you. There's a reason why we do it in this order. Mm. Green tea. Well, mhm. Make sure that you get your hands nice and warm before touching your body. I'm going to take the headphones off as we move through the face and head. Be certain to take the time to warm and nourish each of these locations, especially if you found yourself in the cold or fighting a cold. You want to move until there's a sense of warmth that radiates from your tissues, not because you're pushing hard and creating friction, but because you're bringing more vibrancy and life and liveliness to this area, more circulation of different kinds of aspects of your body, different fluids and different energies and movements, and until there's a sense of warmth and like a glow radiating from that space. Not literally, but comfortably. Moving all over the head and the face at your own pace. And then at the end of that, of course, closing to make certain that everything settles down. And as I say in every class, we always have dozens of people who join us that I don't know who you are because you don't post in the chat. And often you only stay for a short period of time and you're from all over the world. So for those of you, welcome. And if you're not quite sure about what we are doing, please do check down below the video in the comment section for a video that is an introduction to the set, an explanation and exploration of what we're doing and why. And that will help you join us then in the live class and know what in the heck we are doing and why. Feels good. We have a pretty strong rain here right now. There was snow on the ground this morning. Welcome, Del. Nice to have you here. Oh, it's raining hard down there. That means it'll probably be coming up here. Usually it makes its way from Seattle up to the monastery. Continuing to release, just as a reminder from what we've been working on, that penetrating vessel that runs through the center line, from the crown of the head to the space of the center of the bottom of your body. As you open and make room for that, there's a sense of release. And that's what helps to hold you up. Do not push yourself up. Do not try to grip and hold yourself up. Find a way to allow your soft tissue to release, such that it feels as though you're being propped and supported up through the center line. That allows the spine to be free, rather than sitting on your tailbone, pressuring your spine. It's as though that allows your bones to expand upward almost. There's a feeling of the joints opening. Everything softens because you're not gripping, and that allows things to lengthen and spread open. So you're not pushing your head up, you're allowing everything to release. All we are doing is releasing down. And then, as well as we make that space, because we're expanding in these directions, this is allowed to settle because it can hang. Your chest is allowed to hang. Your belly is released because it's not being pressurized by things. This is what we've been talking about the last few days. Finding that within yourself. This is associated with this quietness of the mind, the ability to calm the emotions, to soften the body. And you can start just by softening your hands, by being a little bit friendly to the tissues in your body. So very gently releasing this area. All of this which moves toward the shoulder. If you have more breast tissue than I do, you can be careful and release all the way around it. Everyone's body is different. Being gentle and open. Remember that as we release these spaces, we are allowing things to release through the tissues in a direction. So all of this wrapping around, that is the shoulder, the front and the back, the top and the bottom of the shoulder, it all softens away from the center being the very midline of the body, or anything that it's gripping to. Tension causes us to grip and to shorten and compress. So everything sort of compresses toward the center of your body. And so as you expand, it expands all the way out and through evenly toward the fingertips. And everything that we are doing is helping that release out and through. But also because we are working on the fascia, we don't have to worry so much about trying to force muscles to do anything or joints to do anything. But rather we want to simply encourage the release through this very gentle intention, this warming and softening. This is not the kind of practice that we're trying to force change in the body. This is the practice where we are practicing learning how to listen, be gently aware, and let our mind soak into the tissues. We don't have to try to fix anything. I got some questions about how to move things through, and all we have to know is that we are releasing and allowing in this friendly, open manner, and that for our purposes in general, we are releasing throughout toward the extremities, becoming a little bit longer, a little bit taller. Releasing that lung point. If you've been dealing with any kind of respiratory thing, this can often help deal with that leftover cough that people often have. And then points on the top of the arm, softening 3 points. 1, 2, 3. Today we're going to do a bit of work on the belt or the girdling vessel that runs around the center of the body. And I've been instructing about how there are various points that relate to and resonate with and activate in various ways these 8 extraordinary vessels. And today, this point on the back of the hand, back of the wrist, the outer gate, Waiguan, is related to this reservoir that is part of your waist. So if you'd like, you can spend a little extra time softening that area, just a couple of inches above the wrist, maybe 2.5 centimeters, depending on the size of your body, but between the bones of the wrist on either side, and in a little cave that's found there. A very healing point in general. And as you soften this point, draw some awareness to this area that travels all the way around your waist, like you're wearing a belt or a corset. And I guess corsets are a bit higher, or like down below. Releasing your waist, letting go of the breath. When your mind wanders away, this is a reminder to bring it back, allowing your awareness to soak into your tissues, like water into a sponge or ink into paper, like rain into the soil. At first, it's resistant when the soil is dry, But after a little while, the water starts to permeate it, and then it becomes easier for water to get down in. At first, it's just held on top, and then very slowly it finds its way in, and moist soil allows water through more easily. And that's what we're doing. A lot of the time, we are impermeable because we're a dry husk. There is no sense of awareness or movement in our body. And then as we get better, it's a little bit easier. And then the more awareness soaks in, the easier it is for more awareness to soak in. And chi begins to flow more liberally, and the health expands. Softness increases. Take your time, continue applying the comfortable, friendly awareness to your body. Somatic meditation. Nourishing the ground of your being. Softening and opening. Making contact with every inch of your body. Loving, friendly contact, which by itself can be quite healing in a world that promotes anything but. Continuing to soften your shoulders, softening your elbows. Comfortable and easy. And softening this point in the lungs here. Opening gently. All of the tissue, as it releases from being compressed, it begins to spread out in all directions from your touch. You might be able to feel it as a kind of spreading warmth or movement or tingle. A couple of people have already reported how they are experiencing a kind of giddy comfortable emotion as there's a release in the tissues. And that's a very common experience as well. But any kind of opening expansiveness is just fine. It's just how your nervous system and your brain and your conditioning choose to experience it. Softening through. I've had people, when getting acupuncture, describe colors and shapes and visions and memories, and it's all fine. It's just chi sensation. It's a change happening that your body-mind is processing. So you want to allow that processing to occur without you fixating on it or worrying about it or pushing into it. Like everything that comes up, you just observe it and let it go. If an emotion arises, go, huh, and let it go. Spend a little extra time on this outer gate point. Sen Jiao 5. Softening it open. Releasing your waist, the navel, the sides of your belly, beneath your ribs, your lower back, space just above your hips. Part of what this belt vessel does is it allows us to rise and expand, this sense of the release between the sky and the earth, that kind of yin and yang separation. And so we gently allow this lengthening of the body. Again, not because we push. If you try to lift yourself up by tightening your neck, you actually get shorter. If you try to lift yourself up by lifting your chest or puffing up your back, you're just counteracting your own flow. Find a way to release that allows you to lengthen, that allows you to expand. Your awareness expands, your breath expands, your tissues expand and fill. And all we do is continuously get out of the way. It's the appropriate method. The sequence is quieting, expanding the mind, and then the way the awareness interacts with the body. This is part of chi flow, nourishing chi flow. So we get our minds into our body. We settle in our awareness, and this nourishes the chi. And then we use that chi to nourish the fascial system, for instance, and then the sinews, the tendons, the musculature, and eventually all of that overflows and then nourishes the bones. And it starts with this quiet mind, this gentle heart, and allowing those things to settle into the body. There's a perfect chance to cultivate it. As your tissues begin to fill with chi from this softness and just the awareness moving into them, there's this kind of warm plumpness that happens. There's this expanding, like in a cartoon when one of the characters blows into their thumb and fills themselves with air. There's this kind of happening from the inside to the outside, not in any particular direction, but in all directions. But we're not pushing our chi that way. We are softening so much that we fill in that direction. That's the direction of release. Anything that we do will simply get in the way of that. Continuously softening. therefore continuously filling, nourishing. Softness is not a thing that you add to the body. It's a thing that you are uncovering. Peace is not a thing that you add to your emotional structure. It's what's there when you stop being turbulent, chasing things around all the time, or running away. Stillness and silence is not something you add to the mind. It's what's there when you stop making so much noise. Make space, we get out of the way, and therefore we fill. This is a gift from a monastery in China. I can get it without a reflection too much on it, but there we go. Nope. I guess that works better. Snake and turtle, traditional emblem. This traditional combination of softness and hardness, fullness through release of the spine opening, but also becoming soft and flexible. The spontaneity and expression of the snake, but the quiet cultivation of the turtle. Aspects of the yin and the yang, and in this case referencing the spine in particular. But we want all of these to come through getting out of the way. That's the Daoist method. So all of the methods. Flexibility because we stop holding. Longevity because we nourish and we rest so deeply, not because we try to push our lives. Everything is through the same method. Cultivating stillness. Softening harder. So there's a question about the shoulder well point. I assume, because again, the term well can mean a lot of things, it's the point basically halfway between this bone and the base of your neck, just on top here. Usually on people, if you poke around, there's a swollen lump there from all the tension that accumulates because people walk around like this. And so I assume that's the point you're talking about. Gallbladder 21. And remember, if you have a breast massage method that you've been shown by a doctor or that you're copying the one that we did a couple weeks ago, this is a good time to include that while we move on to the waist. easing open the solar plexus, and then moving to the space between the solar plexus and the navel. Continuing to soften your breath, soften your waist, quiet your mind. So as we release this area and these points open, they move away from each other, they spread. So throughness in this case means through the tissues in all these directions. As you soften your waist, there's an expansion that happens this way, this way. All directions away from the very, very center of the body. Like you're expanding, the ribs release rather than being clenched inward. They open away from each other, the way that that space is expanding. Or the classic example is raisin bread. you have a lump of dough with raisins in it, and then as it warms up in the oven, they all expand away from each other. Every raisin moves away from every other raisin. So you want your internal raisins as we bake ourselves in the fires of cultivation. Everything, all the ribs open, everything expands, not because you hold yourself apart. The holding is what's causing the problem in the first place. Instead, you allow everything to move. The breath moves in and out. The nature of the universe is this opening and closing. And so everything is opening and closing away from each other, being free. And so as you soften the ribs, I'm moving toward my center here, pulling with my fingertips, but not because I'm trying to shorten my ribs, but because I'm trying to release them so that they can expand in the directions that they need to expand. Let's spend some extra time here, moving the hand back and forth. So this is the thigh mai, the belt vessel. Thigh means like to wrap, to girdle something. Mai is a vessel, not a channel, not a meridian. It is not part of that chi system. It's different. So we're not trying to do anything with it any more than we were with the other major 8 extraordinary vessels. Navel level, back and forth, side to side. Warming and softening, and you can come a little bit further today because of this emphasis. But for the most part, the points that we're warming are at the navel, just off to the side of the navel, just off to this, the line of the abdomen here. There's one there, and there's one a little bit further as well. Softening and releasing this line, opening away in the way that compression here looks like this, and expansion is that. We're releasing into that expansion. And we're also doing the same on the lower back, although of course that's more difficult to reach with your fingers. And then gentle circles. eventually covering the entire abdominal space. And again, if you know that you are trying to nourish qi or trying to nourish blood more predominantly, you can make those adjustments with your hands and the directions you're choosing. We talked about it a couple of times in separate classes. And that's okay. You don't have to follow me exactly. Choose whatever feels the most nourishing for you. All of us at different stages of our life tend to feel best with different qualities being nurtured. Awareness sinking in for today because of what we're working on. Emphasize an awareness of the navel, but also at the same time, if you can split your awareness slightly, the Mingmen in the back, connected around the waist. Like you're wearing a warm belt. And let's emphasize the softening of this line by letting our hands circle forward and back a few times. As much as you can, avoid rounding forward as you go back or arching your back. As much as you can, simply softening your shoulders and your shoulder blades to allow your hands to move freely, warming all the way around the waist. Notice any freedom or restriction here in the sides. We talked in another class about freeing the breath from the inside, all the way around the waist to the lower back. And this time, as your hands go back, warm those lines alongside the spine. And then side to side, following that belt vessel around the waist. Spend a bit of extra time here, allowing your awareness to soak into the tissues and the relationship that we have all the way around the waist. For instance, for many back pain patients, the pain that they have can be caused by an especially weak abdominal muscle. Abdominal muscle complex. There's so many things going on there. It's not just one muscle. Which, by the way, we do not adjust by trying to do a bunch of sit-ups and adding tension to that area. Then warming along the spine. Feeling into this area, setting it free. Warming the tailbone. Also this area here, in front of the hips. softening, letting go. Space above the knees, the outside and the inside. Behind the knees, very gently moving across, softening that space behind the knees, easing it open. And below. So there's a question about strength. And in general, if I was to use balance as an example, I was teaching a yoga person yesterday, a person who's a yoga teacher. They've been doing it for their whole lives. And we were talking about the nature of balance, that very often dancers, gymnasts, and a lot of yoga people, they cultivate balance by trying to harmonize and equalize, to balance all of these various directions at once. And so they have their hands in a position, and they look at a steady object, and they try to hold themselves relatively still in a otherwise unsteady position, as she was doing during class. And we talked about how that it's possible to become balanced, to become stabilized in space, not through trying to balance yourself, but rather to become grounded, to allow your weight to sink down into the body so that you're stabilized through grounding rather than trying to stabilize yourself by equalizing all the forces in all the directions. It's a very different experience. And similarly with strength, trying to figure out how to face you and do this. Similarly with strength, these are just words, just ideas. And of course, muscular strength is what often people are asking about. They want to go to the gym and they want to make this one muscle very strong. But as many people discover to their chagrin, strength in a gym, for instance, does not necessarily translate to strength in the real world, if their bodies are incapable of moving correctly. Perhaps they have super strong shoulders and arms, but a spot in their lower back is tight and weak, and so they bend over to pick up a shoe and they throw out their back. This kind of thing happens all the time. So the strength wasn't what they needed. Similarly with flexibility, somebody who can stand in a yoga class and tie themselves into a pretzel, you put them out into the world and they may not be able to touch their toes if they're standing on their feet, or to do a move like turn their waist because they are so tight in all the ways that matter for real world movement. And so flexibility isn't always flexible. Strength isn't always strong. What are we talking about when we say these things? What does it mean to be integrated, to be connected, to have your movements to be harmonized? I think there are lots of ways to be forceful and expressive in the world in ways that somebody might think is strong, but the outcome isn't what they want. So then it makes you question the nature of strength. Is it power over somebody? Is it capacity to express yourself and get the outcome you're looking for? What does that mean to be strong? The other point that we want to emphasize here for the Daimai, the belt channel, is this gallbladder 41 point that we talked about once. It's a bit difficult to describe, so you might want to look it up. The English for it is the foot near tears. And I've had a lot of people actually cry on the table after stimulating this point. Not out of pain, but of emotional release. So gallbladder 41 on the side of the foot. This is the point that I'm often gripping, gently stimulating as we work these points. Under here, I'm holding that point. That harmonizes and resonates strongly with this belt vessel that we're talking about. So it's a general question. I know that the question was about abdominal strength, but strength without stability, what does that mean? Strength without flexibility, what does that mean? Strength in one venue but not another one. Strength that's inconsistent or harmful because it's unbalanced. Somebody that has a really strong muscle on this side, but not on this side, like a lot of bicyclists, the strength slowly destroys their knee. So how strong was it? So rather than answering the question, I pose a question about the nature of useful strength. Where does it come from? It's also worth contemplating the lies about strength that we've been told over the years. In traditional guy culture, at least in where I grew up, people would think, oh, there's a certain kind of masculine behavior that's strong. But when I look around in those people's lives, I see that particular behavior and that way of seeing the world as destroying them, destroying their relationships, destroying their job, destroying everything around them. Yet it's called strength. Is it strong? Is it a lie? What does that mean? And they're good questions to ask. And how do you apply that to your own life? Especially using Daoist principles, because then it's harder to go wrong. Here I'm going to emphasize gallbladder 41 over here on the side of the foot. Maybe stimulating that, getting a feel for this space as you breathe and release. Feels pretty good. I'd like to spend an extra minute with this shaking the mountain. Again, what we're trying to do here is not twist the shoulders and the neck, not turn the head to look left and right. If you're standing up, you do not want to turn the hips or twist the knees, please. Instead, the navel turns. and the navel turns. I'm just putting my fingers here so you can see what the movement is. It's moving away from my center, from my pubic bone, but my sternum and my nose stay in line with each other as I turn and turn. This is a movement that's released through here. I'm not leaning, I'm not doing this. Perfectly upright, maintaining that stability of those other three extraordinary vessels that we were talking about. Turn. I turn. Be free as you turn, as you twist, as you rotate. Your breath continues to be easy. As you create this movement, notice if you have the habit of pulling and then pulling. So I pull from my right side, it pulls me to the side. I pull from my left side, this wrapping around area, and it pulls me over here. Or if I turn to my right, can I soften and release all of the tissues over here? Softening and releasing all the tissues over here. So it allows me to release from one side to the other. Emphasizing the half of the movement that is the letting go. Letting go, letting go, letting go. So you should be getting softer rather than tired. Just another 30 seconds or so of this. Make sure that you're not straining your back or doing anything strange. You're not trying to add momentum. You're not trying to pop your back or anything crazy like that. You're just softening. Softening from one side, softening to the other. And then slowly releasing. Movement just finds its way out of your system. That's one aspect of this belt vessel. The other important aspect that I was mentioning earlier is as I soften down, there's this releasing upward, not up the front, but up through all of the tissues. So the crown of my head releases, everything expands, my spine lengthens, this softens. I'm softening all the way out to my arms, out through my legs, around, so that even as I'm sitting, we shouldn't be folding and crimping ourselves so our legs start to fall asleep and these things. Instead, everything softens through. And this quality of lengthening through, softening around, this quality of heaven and earth separating, we can say. This is another function of the belt vessel. So we want to have a sense of spaciousness through here because the ribs are gently being released away from the hips. The lower spine is decompressing because we're not gripping it anymore. The breath is able to fill all through your body because we're no longer compressing it. Make that space. Feel that space open. Your organs move around. People talk about doing practices like the Xiaotian, the small heavenly circles, the microcosmic orbit. But this is not a thing that you do. That's a misunderstanding. It's a thing that is released. These are movements that happen naturally as circulation, not a chi circulation, but the shape of the body. We're not trying to move things. We are simply releasing everything. The breath moves and fills not because we do a special breath, but because we stop gripping it. These healthy circulations, the lengthening of the arm is not, my arm isn't lengthening because I'm trying to push it longer and stretch my joints out. That's a mistake that people make when we talk about the tendon changing practices. The I Ching, practices, this lengthening occurs because of a softness, because we stop gripping, and then the tissues go like this. And then in that openness, they begin to fill as your mind fills that space. And they feel like the sails of a sailboat with wind. And this is nourishing qi through letting go. But the second we start trying to push and pull with our mind, that's that misunderstanding of the nature of strength, misunderstanding of our place in all of this. Stop doing that kind of stuff. Let yourself expand and release. Let's do a few of the leg movements. But if you can, maintain this sense of expansion. I'm trying to help people to actually get in touch with their 8 extraordinary vessels. Remember, they're not things that you're doing something with. They're spaces that you're opening around. Softening all the way up to this joint here. This meditation cushion that I have here isn't good for this. It holds me at a tilted angle. Good for the early morning sit, not good for this. Softening your waist, don't hold your breath. No restrictions. Your spine continues to release long. You continue to soften your thighs. Don't grip your thighs as you come down, if you can. I'll take my headphones off for the teeth and tongue aspect. Yesterday we worked a lot on the ren, mai, this line here, this conception vessel, and we spent a lot of time softening the throat, the base of the tongue. So you don't want to undo that by tightening your tongue. So after we click our teeth and we allow our tongue to stretch out, it's the same kind of stretching out that I'm describing as we let go and our arm gets long. This softens through and long, the way that our neck softens long because we let it go, not because we lift it up. That's a misunderstanding. So as you move your tongue out, let go and release and let all of this change shape however it needs to, so that your tongue can stretch itself out. But if you feel it pulling back and you're pushing the tongue out, then you're misunderstanding and you're just going to create problems here. The same thing is you're lengthening your tongue in a circle around your teeth. Continuously let go. If it starts to feel like an exercise and you're tired, stop before then. And then slowly increase your ability to let go so that the movement continues longer if you'd like. And then when you're done, swallowing the saliva down as best you can, and spend a few minutes settling your awareness in that space behind the navel, but also around the waist and this belt vessel. Become aware of this space and its relationship to being settled. When you're ready, allow your awareness to spread out from the center to the rest of your body, keeping some aspect of your awareness in the middle, and then expanding from your body out into the space around you, keeping that aspect of your awareness in the center, staying grounded and settled in the present moment, integrating your internal and external experience. Thank you very much. I'll take some questions I see over here. Oh, so there's a question about not practicing when we're sick, which is a common dictum you'll hear. And what that usually means is that if I speak about it in terms of herbs, which is a big part of my training, so it's a common way I think about things, that there's herbal formulas that you would take every day, for instance, that are good for your constitution in general. Whatever your general imbalance is, it's moving you toward wellness for you at your stage in life. And either when you heal that part and that's no longer in imbalance, you would stop taking that and start taking a different formula that's nourishing in a different way. Or if you start to get sick and that pattern no longer fits you, and so that is no longer the right herbal formula for you for that moment, so you would take the herbal formula that's good for you when you're sick at the different stages of sickness that you would have, and depending on the kind of illness that you're experiencing. And so the formula itself would change to fit wherever you were. So if balance was in the middle of my teacup, and this is where we're going, and normally we're over here, and so the formulas we take are trying to get us to move over toward balance, and then suddenly we're sick one day, we find we have leprosy or something, so now we're over here, and the formula we take is to move us towards center again, but it's a different direction entirely. So people that are always cold take a warming formula and they feel better. But then one day they're feverish and they have, dengue fever or something raging through them. Taking a warming formula is no longer particularly helpful. They would take something different. And so that's an example of Qigong practices that are like that. These practices generally do something for us. For instance, it's very common for people to have too much energy coming up and kind of dispersing, and we're clenching and we're creating all these things. And so the practice is generally to maybe help us sink and to move out, or to sink the qi in deep inside us, to pull it toward the center. Like the Hunyuan Qigong set is very much good for this gathering and consolidating in the middle, for example. Every Qigong set is a little bit different. And that's why when you are just getting sick, from the Chinese medical perspective, depending on the kind of illness, if we're talking about a cold or a flu, something starting to make its way in, one of the ways that we think about it in Chinese medicine is that it's coming in from the outside, trying to find its way in, and in various levels of our system. And so the way we would treat that, and you'll find the body doing, is we're coughing and sneezing, and maybe we break us into a sweat, and all these things. It's our body trying to get everything out, depending on where it is. Other areas of the body, it's also trying to get it out, whatever that bug is, which is not always the most pleasant experience, but it's how the body's trying to deal with it. And the better we get at Qigong, we start to have a measure of control over those faculties of whether something's moving up or down or in or out. And that's part of the practice, is that we're learning to facilitate movement in different directions. Like I was telling a story recently, Shifu was talking about how he was doing his gathering practice and he tried to speak and he didn't have any chi in his voice. He couldn't speak. And so he had to move some chi up to start speaking. He had pulled it all down. I can't do that, but he's gained so much control over this kind of process that by moving his mind around and doing things, his body responds really strongly. That happens to me now. If I put my awareness in my heart starts to palpitate. All different kinds. I don't want to talk about other methods and things inside my body, but I know that grosses some people out. But it's become very evident that I have to be clear about what I'm doing with my awareness because it has a physical experience in my body. And so if I'm just getting sick and my body's trying to do all this stuff and push everything up and out, sneezing and coughing and sniffling and all these things, and then I go, no, and I sort of seal everything in, it actually inhibits my body's capacity to defend itself in that way. Similarly, one of the reasons when we talk about people who menstruate, if they're on a certain cycle of their month and their menstruation is particularly sensitive, and then we do a practice that pulls and gathers all of this up when everything's trying to move down and out, and that's the healthful direction at that time, then we can actually get good enough at the practice that we inhibit it, and it can cause problems. And so you'd have to adjust your practice during those times. We put our awareness in a different Dantian location, or we do different things. And so all of this to say that, as my long-winded answer as usual, this is an autistic thing. I have to give you the full backstory before I can give you an answer. That we want to do the practice that's right for the right moment. Most of the time, the practices that are designed around healing people are good for 99% of the public. And there are those people that it wouldn't be good for. There are lots of Qigong practices that are not good for people whose minds are wild. And trying to stabilize their minds actually just causes them agitation. So instead we do give them something else. We give them something like this, and it's really good for them. If you are just catching a cold, it can be really good to do gentle movement stuff. You go for a walk if you're not too sick. Not the walk like people do out here. We have walking to lose weight. You just go for a stroll, a free and easy wandering, the sun Buddha, scattered steps. Or you do gentle, like the silk reeling practice is fine. As long as you're not emphasizing pulling chi in or something, you're just making circles. Those kinds of things are wonderful. The Baduanchin, as long as you're not pushing and pulling too hard on the sinews, it's fine as well. And just don't do closing between. That's when you're first getting sick. But after you've been sick, maybe it's played its way through your system and now you're in the part of sickness that we call recovery. That's when you would switch it around again, and you'd want to spend lots of time getting your chi to settle and gather. As long as you're sure that your system is done and now it's just sort of resting and healing from expending all of that, then you do lots of nourishing gathering practices, letting chi sink and gather. And so I hope that helped my long-winded response. And I'll read these comments again. I can't do both at the same time. Oh, great. Thanks, Corey. You're always very encouraging. uh, yeah, Del, I know what you mean about how we see strength and we kind of become imbalanced as people. And it's in all the different cultures, but the typical masculine American culture, at least on the West Coast that I know better, there's an idea of what strength means um, among everybody that comes, and it's very interesting because it's more like they're sort of flexing for each other, but then they go out into the rest of the world and maybe they can barely tie their shoes, or they certainly can't wash their dishes, something. Their lives are out of balance, and so the strength that they're expending by pumping their muscles up could be nourished in different ways, strengthening their bones, strengthening their relationships, attending their garden, whatever it is that's important for them. How many people are physically buff but they don't know how to love their children? And so it's these ideas of strength that I think are out of balance, and that's why it's hard to answer questions like, well, how do you get stronger? Well, what are we talking about? I'm really glad that you've been feeling better, Del. Yeah, settle for the practical things. Corey, baring your teeth at me. I don't know how to take that. When I was growing up and I didn't understand what all the facial expressions meant, my backstory here. has nothing to do with Qigong, but just as a side note, I used to take notes. I'd have a journal. I drew pictures. I actually would collect magazines, and I would put numbers next to people to figure out what their facial expressions meant. And it was also how I would practice recognizing people because I had trouble with faces. And so I'd flip through the magazine, like a clothing magazine, a Sears catalog or something, and they would have the same models over and over again in different places. And I'd say, oh, I think I know who this one is. And I'd tear out the picture, I'd compare them, see if I could get myself to recognize faces. And so when I see teeth like that in the picture, it was for a while, I thought people were baring their teeth at me because I understood dog body language better than humans. Pretty funny. Okay, looks like there's no more questions. Maybe you're just questioning me at this point. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. I'll try to get that interview processed, and once Nate approves it, I will put it up hopefully in the next few days. It's very fun and interesting. We talk about the nature of animal shapes and how that's useful in various practices. I'll probably be doing interviews with him and other people once a month or so now that the new year has come and the energy's back and people have the desire to want to do stuff again. Thanks, Corey. Thank you, my friends. I really appreciate you joining me. It's so wonderful just to get to practice with people who are interested. It is a beautiful life. Enjoy your practice.